get a lot of questions from a lot of people. I want to start a PhD. Can you please help me? Spend most time in literature review. Read, and read. How to get a PhD? Why you want to do PhD?
This video is brought to you by us, SCMDOJO. We provide awesome courses, guides, best practices for supply chain community.
Hi folks, welcome to one more episode of SCMDOJO Knowledge. Today I'm going to talk about how to find and get PhD. 13 practical tips. I get a lot of questions from a lot of people. I want to start a PhD. Can you please help me? Can you recommend me universities, topic, etc., etc. So today I'm going to share my experience as a PhD student and helping other people finding and getting PhD. Let's get started. So before we talk about how to find and get a PhD, there's few things I want you to do. So number one thing I want you to ask you to do is to answer this question. Why you want to do PhD? What is the purpose? What is the motivation? Because PhD is essentially a very, very long process. If you do full-time, it's 3 to 4 years. If you do part-time, it's like 5 to 7 years or even more, right? So you're going to stick with something for a very, very long time. So you have to think very, very carefully why you want to do PhD, right? Is this money? Or you need a doctor's in front of your name because it sounds sexy, right? Or you want to become a professor and you have a really passion for teaching, or you have a real passion for research. You have to answer this question. In my case, it was a passion of research because I think I can do research. I like doing research. I like doing management research, and that was my motivation. What is your motivation? Now, tip number 2, which is you need to answer this question: what topic you want to do research for? Because finding a topic is one of the most important thing and the area of research, right? Because again, like first point, you got to stick with this topic for a very, very long time, right? So that means you have to be liking that topic, right? So for example, I started my PhD as a Six Sigma student, but I didn't really like it because I was doing a supply chain job. So I have to drop it after 18 months and start again on supply development, which is again part of my job, and I like supply chain very much. So you have to think very carefully what is the topic you want to do research on, because you eventually gonna become the expert on that topic. So you got to love that topic. So think about it very carefully and write it down. The third tip I'm going to give you is to get a book, How to Get a PhD, a handbook for students and supervisors. I have given the link below in this blog, so go and click on the link and buy that book. Because that book is one of the essentials I would recommend you to read, right? Because this book can tell you the process, the do's, don'ts, and a lot more detail than this video, right? So if you don't have a patience to that book, that means you probably don't have a patience to do a full-time PhD anyway, or a PhD in general. So get a book, because that will help you to understand how the PhD process works. So far what has happened is you know why you want to do PhD, you know the area, you've read the book. Now, so let's get started on how to find a PhD. There's 3 ways you can find a PhD. Number 1, you need to identify professors or researchers in the area of your interest. You just Google, for example, PhD, professor in management science or chemistry or physics or IoT, artificial intelligence, whatever the topic is. You need to do a research and you will find certain universities or professors who are doing research in that topic, right? Go, contact them, write 1 or 2 pages of research interest, why you're so interested, what is your motivation, and I can promise you that if you send it to 8 different people or professors, for example, 6 of them will reply, right? Because our professors want PhD students which like the topic, right? So if you just contact them with your research interest, they will get back to you. Sometimes something very strange happens. So when I give this advice, people say, oh, can you help me write my 2-pager of research interest? And I'm saying, if you can't write a 2-pager of research interest, how are you going to do research? So first thing first, if you're writing that research interest for the professor, why you want to do a PhD, that also going to tell you that you like the topic or not, or you really want to do a PhD in the first place. The second tip I'm going to give you in finding the PhD is to go to website like Ph.D.com and find high-ranking universities in the area of your interest. That happened with me because I want to do research in management science, or let's call it supply chain. And I found during those days, I'm talking 2005-6, where Lancaster University Management School was in top 5 in management research, and that got my attention. And then I contacted the management school, I contacted the professors there, send them my research interest, and then the rest of the things will follow, and I end up with a scholarship. So that was my way of finding it. There is still a lot of ranking available of top management schools or research schools. Find that research school ranking and then contact them. The third one is go to the website where the PhD jobs are listed. Believe me or not, there is a website called How to Find a PhD. They're not paying me any money, but again, Google them. You'll find that there's a lot of PhD opportunities available. You'll find the one you like, hopefully. Number 5 tip I'm going to give you is try not to do PhD by your own money. And there's a very strong and compelling case for that. Because universities and the professors want to do research. This is their KPI. Because professors and especially lecturers who maybe just passed on and they are assistant professor or associate professor, one of their KPIs within the university to become a full-time professor is to publish research. So it's in their interest, right, to find a student who want to do research with them, publish research papers. So by doing that, they will become a co-author with you, right, and it will count in the number of papers they have published. It happens with me, right? So it's in professors' interest to find students who are good in research. The same KPIs go for the universities as well. They have to produce X amount of PhD, and there's a lot of scholarships available, right? It's hard to find, I get it, but try to find a scholarship PhD because it's in the interest of universities to fund research. So it's gonna take long, but you're gonna find it. So if you decided to do it for your own money, which I would never recommend you, right? Try to find maybe an employer who can fund your PhD. So in my case, I had a full-time PhD scholarship from Lancaster University Management School. I tried to become a part-time student, and then I asked my employers, can you pay me? And Eton was kind enough to fund my PhD because my research will essentially help the company in creating new knowledge, helping solve a problem, right? So find an employer who can fund your PhD. Again, strong piece of advice: don't do PhD by your own money. If you do it, that's your own choice. Number 6, which is probably the most important tip I'm going to give you, is to understand how to get a PhD. A lot of people start PhD not knowing what is the criteria. Or also you need to understand how not to get a PhD at the same time. Because this understanding is critical to the end result you're going to put into. So essentially there's 2 simple criteria to get a PhD degree. The first one is a contribution to the body of knowledge. That means whatever the area and the body of knowledge you are working with, you are adding to the existing body. Right? So you're creating new knowledge for the human beings. The second is, it is useful for the humankind. So if you're inventing something which is pretty useless, you will not get a PhD. For example, you say, okay, Elon Musk is creating a spaceship, we will go to Mars, so let's start right from the beginning and let's invent a packaging for Mars which is environmentally friendly so we don't pollute. Do you think you're going to get a PhD for that? Probably not. The point is, you have to find a PhD which will be useful to the mankind. Number 7, build a relationship with the supervisor. So what happens is, you find a PhD, you find a supervisor, and now you'll probably agreed the target as well. But this is the time you sit down with your supervisor and you build a relationship. You align the expectation, you align what he or she wants you to do. Maybe he wants you to do some, as a teacher's assistant or research assistant, maybe you want to do some teaching, or maybe he or she wants you to do some more courses on the research method. Whatever that is, you need to agree that how you're going to work, how many hours you're going to work, what is the expectation in terms of submitting literature review, research method, so on and so forth. So this alignment from the beginning is super important. Don't leave it after 2 years or after 6 months. So ask the supervisor how you want me to work, what is the preferences, and I can tell you this will really give you a good head start. Number 8, spend most time in literature review. Read, and read. If you strongly read, that means you've got a problem, because literature review, it's the, let's call it a base, a building block of the PhD. Because remember the criteria I've told you, contribution to the body of knowledge is the most essential criteria. And how you gonna find out that you are really contributing to the body of knowledge, whatever the body of knowledge you're working with, is by reading all the existing research. And it's a tedious task. It's a tedious task to find research papers, and it's a tedious task to read them. It's a tedious task to summarize in your own language, and then finding like some kind of arrangement which are common on certain topics, which are basically some common areas of research or some common themes, or basically some common researches. So you have to basically very systematically arrange your literature review, which leads to identifying the research question, right? So what generally will happen is you're going to start reading a lot of materials in the area of your interest, and you're probably going to end up with 9, 10, or X amount of research question. And then you're going to sit down with your supervisors or supervisor, and then you're going to agree that this specific topic or research interest I want to work on. And that thing which looks pretty simple is going to be a very small area which you want to research, is going to take years. Actually, definitely a couple of years, or probably more, right? So literature review is super duper important. Spend time, read as much as possible. Number 9, pick research method strategically. What I mean by strategically, there's very few research methods anyway. Your questionnaire, your survey, your action research, your experiment, so on and so forth. I have picked action research strategically because I would not have enough time while I was working full time, right, to go and interview people or do the questionnaire for 200 people. So I know I couldn't able to do it. So I choose action research strategically because action research is like a kind of consultation. At the same time, you're solving a problem and you're creating body of knowledge using the existing case studies or the problem I was working with. Therefore, choose the research method which is going to suit your working style and where you can collect the data easily. Number 10, understand the structure of the PhD thesis from the beginning. Right. So again, like any PhD research, you have an introduction, you have a literature review, then you have a research method, and then you are basically writing a few chapters, whatever the chapters is based on your research method. Then you're creating body of knowledge. Then there is a discussion chapter, and there is a conclusion. So whatever research method you're going to choose, make sure you understand how your PhD thesis look like. So how do you know how the PhD thesis look like? So what I used to do is I used to go to the university and sit in library and find out how many people have done a similar kind of research. So what I did was I find out how many PhD students my supervisor Linda has basically supervised, and I found their names. I went to university and then basically asked the librarian to give me the PhD thesis. So I reviewed one by one. So I figured out how they're writing it, what research method. I get a lot of ideas how the structure of the PhD look like, and it helped me greatly in doing my own research. So go and find other PhD theses and see how it looks like. Again, similarly at SCMDOJO, my PhD thesis is actually available, right? So if you go to SCMDOJO Academy, you go to eBooks, where you're going to find my PhD thesis on supply development. That's one of the examples if you want to get. Number 11, write. You have to write from the start and you have to write at the end. I don't know why I've seen some students who basically leave the writing of the thesis at the end. That's a bad habit. You write for your literature review, you write for your research method when you do the research methods or selection of research methods. Then while you're doing the research, whatever research method you picked or whatever topic you picked, you continue to write. Maybe you're not going to use most of the content you've written, but at least it will serve as a basis of 60 to 70% of the content you're going to put into your research papers or your research thesis. So write, continuously write, don't leave it till the end. Number 12, be prepared for the shit happens. And that is super important. Let me tell you 2 real stories of that. So one of the story of my close friend, right? He had the full-time PhD scholarship, right? He had the supervisor. He was doing fine. He selected a topic, and then he picked a research papers or research topic he wants to do. He almost basically written 90% of the thesis, and before he about to submit the thesis, the supervisor got ill, right? And because the supervisor got ill, he couldn't able to finalize the submission of the thesis, and then it took about 6 to 8 months by the time he's got a new supervisor assigned. So when the new supervisor was assigned, they did not like the work has been done. And then they asked my friend to actually do rewrite the thesis. And of course, after spending 3.5 years, you're not going to rewrite the thesis, right? Because that's the bad idea. I mean, you've done the research, you were very close to submission, right? It's not your problem that your supervisor got ill. I can give you my example. I was doing part-time PhD. I have a full-time job, family. I have a lot of things to do, and I've almost given up my PhD twice. Right? I said, it's too much pressure. I cannot do it. But whenever I try to discuss with my supervisor, saying, it means 4 or 5 years. It took me 3.5 years to do actually my own literature review, right? And I said, it's just getting too much to me. I mean, I've got to, full time. I've got to write the full thesis. And she said, you're doing very well. Your literature review is super solid. It's pretty good. You're using the excellent research, which not many people are using. Please continue. So twice she basically talked me out of quitting the PhD, and thanks God she did. Right. So bless Linda for helping me out. So therefore, I'm always very thankful. So the moral of the story is, the supervisor can make or break your thesis and the submission of thesis. So build a good relationship. Listen to the supervisor. Last but not least is the preparation of the viva. People get really scared, right? They get very worried. They basically don't sleep. And I think basically preparing for the viva is the easiest thing you do. You've done the research. It's your PhD thesis. You have done everything. No one knows your PhD thesis than yourself. So basically in the viva, what they do is they ask you, please tell us what you've done. Why are you choosing this research method? How many papers you've published? It's essentially an exercise of verifying you are the person who has done the research. So as long as you are the person who has done the research, that's the easiest thing you will do, right? Is just to explain them. And for me, my viva was finished in 45 minutes. I couldn't even believe. And out of this 45 minutes, it was like 20 minutes of jokes, right? So maybe the actual time of viva was 25, and I just couldn't believe. I thought it was just it was too easy, right? Maybe it was just me, maybe not for many people. But the point is, if you've done the research, you should be very confident about it, right? And you should sail it through. So hopefully, these real examples of the tips which I have gained over the years and in supervising thesis or basically doing my own research help you. So again, if you like what we're doing at the SCMDOJO, like, share, and subscribe. And I wish you all best of luck in your future research. Take care, ciao, keep it simple and keep it real.